Okay. Hey, Bajan, I think we're good to go. I have a couple of people who joined us as well, so we can start.
Thank you so much, Mr. John. My apologies again. Since we started the recording, I would like to repeat that I apologize again because of the technical issues. I'm not able to start my camera. My computer isn't allowing me, but we will continue the program. Thank you, everyone, for coming today and giving us your valuable time. August 15 is a dark day in Afghanistan, and I believe that every single person who has ever set their foot on the ground of Afghanistan or have worked in any capacity for Afghanistan has been impacted one way or another. Today, on August 15th, we have decided to bring in women of caliber to speak about coding of gender apartheid and the gender apartheid in Afghanistan. So, welcome, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning from anywhere around the world that you are joining us today. My name is Habiba Ashna Marhoon. I was the founder of the Pashtun Woman Viewpoint, later on Avid Afghan Woman in Dialogue, and recently the Liberty Coalition. These three organizations previously have worked for Afghan women. Currently, I'm working in my own capacity as an individual for the women of Afghanistan. Today, we have women who have achieved a lot in their career, in their workplace, in their fields, and also in establishing the grounds for women's rights movement and acknowledging the women's rights violations in Afghanistan. Our speakers, we will begin, are, and I will take a little time in here because I really want to introduce our speakers in a manner that they deserve. We have Dr. Lauren Oates. Dr. Oates has worked in various leadership roles with organizations, lastly as the program director before becoming the executive director in 2018. She holds a Bachelor in Arts and Honors in International Development from McGill University, an MA in Human Security and Peace Building from Royal Roads University, and a PhD in Language and Literacy Education from the University of British Columbia. She has worked with a variety of development organizations, multilateral agencies, and governments designing, planning, evaluating, or implementing programming in education and gender equality, particularly in war-affected countries. She is the recipient of several awards and distinctions, including a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal awarded by the province of BC. I would say that. We have our other speaker is Dr. Evelina Ochab. Dr. Evelina has worked in various fields and she's a contributor. She's a Forbes contributor. She's a lawyer and an author. Dr. Ochab is a senior program lawyer with IBA's Human Rights Institute and co-founder of Coalition for Genocide Response. Dr. Ochab has been covering atrocity crimes for Forbes since December 2016. Her specific focus includes minority situations, children in conflict, and conflict-related sexual violence. Dr. Ochab covered the Uyghur genocide, the persecution of religious minority women and girls, and the abduction of children from Ukraine. Dr. Ochab conducted several fact-finding missions, including to Iraq after its liberation from Daesh and Ukraine after Russia's attack. Dr. Ochab holds a PhD in international law and medical ethics. Her recent book, State Responses to Crimes of Genocide, co-authored with Lord Alton of Liverpool, engages on the failures to prevent and punish genocide. Dr. Ochab authored the initiative to establish the UN International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief on August 22nd. Dr. Rachab, welcome. We're honored to have you here. And also, Dr. Lauren Oates, thank you for joining us. We will continue introducing our other speakers. We have Ms. Lina Rosebay. Ms. Lina Rosebay is a known journalist in Afghanistan. She's an acclaimed and award-winning Afghan writer and a poet in Dari language. Her works include Dari and English short stories, poetry, as well as social and political commentaries, which have been published in major Dari, Pashto, and English publications such as Ashiyan, Farda, Afghan German Online, Khabaran, Azmun Mili, Nawai Afghan, Washington Prism, Taiwan, Anis, Diplomatic Courier, and moreover. Moreover, she formerly served as the Dari editor-in-chief of Zeba, a socio-political and fashion magazine, as well as editorial columnist for the Umaid Weekly, the Ashiyan magazine, and Washington Prism. The recipient of several poetry awards and journalism awards, Lina Rosebay's literary contributions have been recognized and featured in books about contemporary Afghan poets and female writers. And I would like to add a very personal note here that I'm also one of her fans of poetry. We have another distinguished speaker, and of course, the one who is behind the webinar and the conference that we are sitting here today, Ms. Farishta Himmati. Farishta Jan is an Afghan journalist and a women's rights activist from Afghanistan. She holds a Bachelor of Journalism from Kabul University and a Master of International Relations with a major in diplomacy from Kazakhstan. In 2022, Farishta Jan settled in Canada, which she now calls home. Farishta has made a profound impact as an investigative reporter, engaging radio host, and adept communication specialist internationally across various media channels and projects in Afghanistan. She is now engaged in her role as the CEO of the Afghanistan Journalist Support Organization, known as AJSO, and head of the Advocacy Committee for Women Journalists in the same organization. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And we hope to begin our conference. We welcome everyone. We would like to start our conference by welcoming Farishta Jan Himmati, who is the CEO of AJSO. Farishta Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Habiba John, for all the nice introductions. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody who is here joining us at this crucial webinar. Welcome to today's important webinar hosted by Afghanistan Journalist Support Organization and Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. Our topic, the role of media and the codification of gender apartheid in Afghanistan, is both critical and timely at this moment. As we all know, today marks the 3 dark years anniversary of Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, where gender apartheid is shaping. Gender apartheid refers to the systematic and severe discrimination against women, denying them fundamental rights and opportunities. Gender apartheid creates a stark separation between men and women during the limiting women access to education, work, and participation in the society. It is essential to recognize that this kind of operation is neither supported by Islam nor by the unique cultural values of Afghan people. Historically, Afghan women were active in various aspects of life, even in remote areas. Places like Badakhshan, Jawzjan, and Herat, and even Kandahar, saw women participating in community and educational activities, including sports. Today, Afghan women face dire challenges. They are deprived of physical, psychological, and social security. The current de facto authorities has silenced their voice through censorship and threats, preventing them from sharing their experience with the world. Today, an Afghan woman is dying in every 2 hours in childbirth. The systematic oppression of women and girls is nothing less than gender apartheid and constitute the foundation of Taliban's rule. On July 30th, 2024, Wahida Amiri appeared in front of the Tom Lanston Human Rights Commission of the US Congress and demanded the recognition of gender apartheid in Afghanistan. And this is her word. In the pursuit of this simple wish, I have gone to the street facing the biggest terroristic group in the history, the Taliban, which is armed to the teeth with American weapons. I have experienced violence, the least of which was tear gas. I have been persecuted. I have been warned and threatened repeatedly. Then I was kidnapped and imprisoned by the terroristic group. I have been questioned at midnight. I have been dehumanized and forced to confess. My house and family were taken hostage, and in the end, I was exiled. The Taliban killed a female YouTuber, Hora Sadat, then invented a story to cover up the murder. A 6th-year school girl who intentionally failed her final exam only to be able to attend the school the next year as well. Gulbibi lost her home to the recent flood in Baghlan province in northern Afghanistan, and this is her word. The flood washed away my entire mad house. All I could do was to save 4 of my children. The environmental and humanitarian crises that engulfed Afghanistan in recent years have been created unique challenges for women like Gulbibi. So now, why has the world not maintained the commitment and efforts it had from 2002 to 2018 up until the Doha Agreement towards Afghan women's rights after the collapse in 2021? What changed? Do women no longer exist in Afghanistan? Or was the international community's commitment false? These are the questions Afghan women are asking. 20 million Afghan women are asking these questions. Who is responsible? On the other hand, Afghan journalists face significant risks, but also providing invaluable reports into the harsh realities of systematic discrimination against women in Afghanistan. Their reporting helps to bold these issues and ensure that global community understands the severity of gender apartheid in Afghanistan. By supporting these journalists, AJSO aims to raise their voices, bring critical issues to light, and drive international pressure for meaningful change. Thank you for joining us today, and I do look forward to hear from other respected guest speakers as well. Thank you, Habiba John, and you're good to invite other speakers.
Thank you so much, Felista John. And again, thank you for organizing this program. Now, we would like to welcome Dr. Lauren Oates from the Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. Dr. Oates, I would like to ask you if you could please address what is gender apartheid, what does codification of gender apartheid mean, and why is it important?
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction and for having me as part of the event. I'm actually going to use some slides to walk through my remarks. So just give me one moment to pull those up. All right, I trust you can see the slides now or we'll be able to shortly. So yeah, I mean, we're gathered here today on a very grim anniversary. So the first thing I want to say is that I'm sorry that this betrayal happened to Afghanistan, to Afghans, and we shouldn't accept it as an unchangeable reality, but as an open wound that needs to be addressed urgently. So I'm glad to be with you today and to say a few words about a really critically important issue, which I think is also an apt term for what we are witnessing in Afghanistan, but also potential opportunity, a framework for around which we can rally to push for accountability and ultimately for an end to the egregious human rights violations that are occurring in Afghanistan. So what is gender apartheid? I think this audience requires no description of the current situation in Afghanistan. We're all too familiar with the long list of injustices and atrocities that the de facto authorities are committing. Instead, I want to outline why gender apartheid is the right term to describe what we're seeing happen in Afghanistan. And I'll eventually also get to how it's a strategic term when it comes to options for justice and accountability. So to help me, I've used this excerpt from a very important article by Dr. Karima Banoun, which was published 2 years ago. And what's important about the term gender apartheid is that it describes a system of discrimination, of injustice, of inequality, as opposed to one-off incidents or standalone policies. And that's what we need to understand, is that the Taliban's policies and their behavior constitute a system. And it's a system that's designed with intent and planned and comprehensive and total. It seeks the erasure of women from public life and their complete subordination. And I should also note that it's not a new term. It was used widely to describe the situation of women in Iran after the revolution, and it was also widely used by Afghan women during the first period of Taliban rule by activists back at that time. But what's different about this time is that activists are leading a serious effort to give legal weight to the term, using it to seek justice through the international legal system. Another feature of gender apartheid, which differentiates it from other cases of gender discrimination, is that it is so all-encompassing that it also constitutes a kind of totalitarian system, if we consider the definition of totalitarianism of stripping away individual freedom. And I think that this fact has not been properly grasped by many people, including global decision makers. There's this idea that the Taliban issue these edicts restricting women's behavior sort of on the side of some grander vision. And that's incorrect. The inhumanity of women is their central vision. And somehow we live in a time where this has been made acceptable, where 20 million human beings, half of Afghanistan's population, are persecuted and suffering on the basis of an aspect of their identity, their gender, and there are no accusations of genocide, of apartheid, no general public global movement, no protests in the street. And this is another strategic reason to use the term gender apartheid, to rally the attention, so far absent, of the international community. The term has a weightier, graver connotation to it, and we need that right now, as it's a burden on us activists to constantly and continuously point out the gravity of the situation, the suffering it is causing, and the mass scale of its impact. There's no human rights crisis in the world today that impacts as many people as gender apartheid does. And yet the collective response from the outside world, and I include here all stakeholders, the public, the policymakers, the culture, doesn't match up at all with the urgency of the situation. So we need to close that gap, and we need to point this fact out over and over again and ask that question, why? Why is there indifference to the lives of women and girls in Afghanistan? Gender apartheid is also, sorry, I'll go back to this slide. It's also an important term and concept to fight the normalization of engagement with the Taliban. Over the past few months, we've seen really worrying signs of rapprochement with the Taliban, especially from China and Russia for economic and political motivations, but also from Pakistan and the Central Asian states. And in other cases, we simply see a notable silence, an unwillingness to actually call for restoration of rights, such as from India, which has also fully closed its borders to Afghan nationals. So it's critical that you, as media representatives and the activist community, call this out. States will only engage with the Taliban if they see it as being risk-free. If they see that it will bring condemnation and criticism, then the cost of engagement is too high. They will desist. But right now, it's appearing that they perceive little consequence for working hand in hand with the Taliban. And the outcome is that that helps to whitewash Taliban atrocities. So the pressure needs to be dialed up considerably. And I'd like to call your attention to the last part of this statement on the slide from Karima Banoun. The terrible message sent to women everywhere that their rights don't matter. When the Taliban first ruled Afghanistan, we saw how it gave inspiration to other groups to demean and dehumanize women and girls elsewhere, Boko Haram, Daesh, and others. This is guaranteed to happen again. So this is a key message to amplify, that this is an issue of global concern with far-reaching consequences for the fight for women's rights, threatening to roll back hard progress fought for over many decades globally. And empowering misogynist groups is both a human rights issue and a security issue. You merely need to look at a map of the world to notice that the same places where women are treated badly are the same places that produce violence, instability, and extremism. And this is no coincidence. The scholar Valerie Hudson and her colleagues have shown how what gets normalized domestically within a country is duplicated in states' political behavior. In other words, if it's normalized to abuse women in private, then the behavior of the state will mirror this. They will be exploitative and violent as a member of the international community. The state's behavior towards other states will mirror its behavior towards its own people, towards its women. This tells us that if we're interested in having peace in the world, in stopping unstable regimes and extremist movements, then we need to pay attention to the status of women, because these things go hand in hand. Let us not forget that Osama bin Laden planned the 9/11 attacks from the sanctuary he had been given under the protection of the Taliban in Kandahar. It's a historical lesson that we've forgotten far too soon, and the consequences will be that history may be doomed to repeat itself. So, in summary, gender apartheid refers to a system of injustice and inequality, and this is part of its power. It reflects a form of totalitarianism, which is an aspect that we need to recognize about the regime and its ideology. And we need this term for awareness raising and for advocacy to correct the global indifference that we're seeing to the situation. And we also need it to prevent normalization of relations with the Taliban, which will ultimately lead to their full acceptance and permanent the permanence of their behavior. We also can use it to point out that this is not the issue of a single country or even a single region, but truly a global issue and a global threat. And finally, gender apartheid provides a legally strategic concept for accountability. And I'm glad that we have a lawyer with us today. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure Dr. Ochab will address the nuances of and the specifics of codification and what can be done there. I will mention that we have a statement on our website, which is signed by many organizations all over the world, which lays out a little bit the specific actions that we're calling for to begin with, and identifies some of the specific mechanisms. But I'm sure Dr. Ochab will speak in more detail to that. And those are also part of ongoing discussions within the community, because I think that now's the time to get into the specifics and to move forward on pursuing specific mechanisms in the international justice system to reverse courts. So in closing, I'll just remind us that the Taliban have always been an open book. They tell us exactly what they're going to do, and we should believe them. We have no grounds to think that they're bluffing, to give them the benefit of the doubt, to assume that they'll catch up with the world and moderate themselves. They've told us their plans very clearly, and a lot is at stake. There are 20 million hostages being held in Afghanistan right now. There are millions of girls and women trying to hang on to their last shred of hope for a dignified life. And many have died. They've died by suicide, they've died by execution, by murder, by starvation. and others are slowly dying from loss of hope. In this crisis, we don't have a lot of tools in our toolbox, but one we do have is to make use of this concept of gender apartheid, to use it for public awareness, for media engagement, for advocacy, for policy influencing, and for legal redress. Your role as members of the media is pivotal in this regard. Your voices are needed. You are a channel between the public and the women whose voices can't be heard. So thank you for what you have done and for everything that you will do. So I'll pass it back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oates. Appreciate your time. And just to add on, this meeting, this conference is being recorded, and we will be sending this to many other organizations and outlets and sharing the word with everyone to find more allies and work with more allies, and also to raise more awareness. So thank you so much for your time. Our next speaker is Dr. Evelina Ochak. Dr. Ochak, if you could please address how can codification of gender apartheid as a crime against humanity be achieved? And what are the different pathways to achieve this? The floor is yours, Dr. Ochak.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for organizing this very important session, and for indeed raising the issue of gender apartheid, which is something that requires more attention globally. And as of course at the very beginning it was mentioned, what was happening on the 15th of August 3 years ago, I was also thinking what I was doing that day. And I remember just before the 15th of August, I was working with a number of organizations working on evacuations of minority communities, especially religious or belief minority communities. But as some of the evacuations stopped, especially to Doha, that's when we started also looking into evacuations of especially women at risk who were contacting us and indeed raising their concerns and mentioning the threats that they were facing. And we heard horrible stories of some of the women at risk being stuck in basements, one of them even being pregnant and also with small children. So we were hearing many of such stories, and this also resulted in us doing evacuations of Afghan women at risk, including female judges, female lawyers, prosecutors, and so on. And even then, we knew exactly the threat that women were facing in Afghanistan, especially women in position of power before the Taliban takeover. And of course, we knew what was coming, what was going to happen to other women who remained. And this is something that stayed in our minds. And I will mention also some of the work we are trying to do on the topic here in the UK, where I'm based. But during my presentation, mostly want to focus, of course, on codification of gender apartheid. And I would like to focus on the draft convention on crimes against humanity, but also on the Rome Statute, amending the Rome Statute, and also domestic avenues. What can be done domestically to codify gender apartheid, and including what we are trying to do here in the UK, also trying to codify gender apartheid as a crime under the UK domestic law. And I'll just start with the draft convention on crimes against humanity. Broadly, unlike other international crimes such as war crimes, genocide, torture, and forced disappearances, there is still no international treaty specifically dedicated to crimes against humanity. And this is indeed a major gap in the international justice system, and a gap that is being addressed right now. And some of you may remember back in 2019, the International Law Commission adopted the draft articles on prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity, and recommended, submitted it to the UN General Assembly for its consideration, and recommended the elaboration of a convention on the basis of the draft. In December 2022, the General Assembly established a 2-year process for further consideration of the recommendation from the International Law Commission. And the 6th committee is set to take a decision on the recommendation in autumn 2024. So of course we are coming to that decision, and it should happen over the next few months, and I will mention it later on. The draft article on prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity, this draft is available online. I can share the link after my presentation as well. And it is a very important document. It does not only define crimes against humanity in Article 2, but also imposes duties on states to prevent and punish the crimes in Article 3 and 4. And for example, Article 3 talks about general obligations, that each state has the obligation not to engage in acts that constitute crimes against humanity, but also each state undertakes to prevent and to punish crimes against humanity. A duty that is also a similar form of this duty is included in Convention on the crime of genocide. In that convention, in Article 1, states are also obliged to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. And this duty is very much replicated in the draft Convention on Crimes Against Humanity, but specifically relate to crimes against humanity. And for example, in Article 4, it says that the obligation to prevent means that each state undertakes to prevent crimes against humanity in conformity with international law through effective legislative, administrative, judicial, and other appropriate preventive measures in any territory under its jurisdiction, and cooperation with other states, relevant international organizations, and other organizations as appropriate. So of course, these are very, very important, not only first, the codification and the definition of crimes against humanity, but also associated duties. It's not only about calling what are crimes against humanity, but there are certain duties that follow. And so this is what's been happening in terms of codification or in terms of establishing conventional crimes against humanity. It's been a long process and it's ongoing. And many of you would also know that there's a big campaign led by Afghan and Iranian women called the End Gender Apartheid Now campaign. And this campaign has been calling for codification of gender apartheid in the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity. So as it stands, the convention in its definition does not include gender apartheid. It includes gender persecution, it includes apartheid, but does not include gender apartheid. And the call from Afghan and Iranian women is to make sure that the wording is inclusive and indeed includes the wording of gender apartheid. And to date, over 10 countries, at least 10 countries, member states of the UN, express the willingness to explore the codification of the crime of gender apartheid in the proposed Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crimes Against Humanity, which is a step, of course, forward. And among those countries, we have, of course, Afghanistan, we have Australia, Brazil, Malta, Mexico, and also United States mention gender apartheid in its response or written comments that they sent in relation to the draft articles of the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity. Last year, the UN was, of course, collecting comments from states in relation to the draft as it was submitted by the International Law Commission. And indeed, several countries responded to that call. And within those responses, there were also very strong recommendations in terms of codifying gender apartheid. And one of the most strongly worded submission was, for example, from Malta, that called for very clear codification of gender apartheid, and indeed the definition as was mentioned earlier during the session. And other states that have been also supportive of codification include the Philippines, Chile, Iceland, Austria, and of course we are talking about around or over 10 member states, UN member states willing to support codification of gender apartheid, but the road is still very long, and of course there's great need to ensure that that the campaign to codify gender apartheid without the draft convention on crimes against humanity is supported by majority. And again, there are many organizations working on it. There are wonderful Afghan and Iranian women working together with the campaign to end gender apartheid today. And anyone should be joining this campaign and supporting it as much as possible. And over the next months, there will be a number of important steps that will need to be taken in order for the convention to proceed, but also in order to include gender apartheid. And only last night, I received a letter or email from Akila and Metra, who are of course working on the campaign to end gender apartheid. And they mentioned a number of very important dates for everyone to keep in mind. And indeed, in October and November, when the UN General Assembly 6th Committee will decide how to proceed with the proposed Convention of Crimes Against Humanity. One of the important dates is the 10th of October, and this is when the 6th Committee will hold its annual general debate on the topic of crimes against humanity. And it is anticipated that states will focus their statements on whether to move the treaty forward to negotiations or not. And the potential procedure for doing so. So we're talking more about the procedural discussion rather than discussion on the substantive part of the process, or indeed discussion about gender apartheid. But this is very important. Of course, we would like to see that, yes, states would be supportive of moving forward with the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity. And there will be a clear process for moving forward. And then the next important date will be in November. And that's when the resolution on the topic of crimes against humanity will be discussed over the term of the 6th Committee's full session through November. And that's when also a decision on whether to move forward with the treaty will be made alongside other legal issues before the committee towards the end of November. And of course, if the 6th Committee decides to move the treaty forward to negotiations this year, this is also when a lot of support will be needed, and support from civil society organizations, support from journalists, as we also discussed. That there is a very important role for journalists, not only using the wording of gender apartheid, but also shining light on the ongoing situation of women and girls. Something what is happening. Of course, it is nothing unusual. It is not only characteristic for the situation in Afghanistan. It's just the media move on from one conflict, one situation to another. It happens like that always. So of course, what we'd like to see is more focus on the situation of women in Afghanistan, to very much make the argument that the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan is not improving. Only because we are not hearing about the situation does not mean that the situation has changed or it is improving. And there's a number of wonderful organizations who have been documenting all the decrees and edicts that have been adopted by the Taliban to restrict women's rights one by one. And this is something that, again, there needs to be more education on the topic. We need to see this kind of documents and this kind of reporting more. So this is a very brief introduction in relation to the draft convention on crimes against humanity, what has been happening today, and what are the next steps. But very briefly, I wanted also to now discuss the Rome Statute and what is possible there. And the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court is the treaty that established the International Criminal Court. And the Rome Statute defines crimes against humanity in Article 7, and this includes the crimes of apartheid and gender persecution, but not gender apartheid. And persecution is defined as intentional or severe deprivation of fundamental rights contrary to international law by reasons of identity of the group or collectivity. And that includes also reasons of identity of the group as gender group. And the crime of apartheid means inhuman acts of character similar to those referred in that article, committed in the context of institutionalized regime of systematic oppression and domination by one racial group over any other racial group or groups, committed with the intention of maintaining that regime. So of course, the definition of apartheid is very much established around the concept of race, and there is no reference to gender. And there is also one part of crimes against humanity, or yet another method of bringing about crimes against humanity that could potentially include some of the elements of gender apartheid, although again without using the wording of gender apartheid, and it is Article 7.1k, which is in relation to other inhumane acts of a similar character. As other crimes in Article 7, intentionally causing great suffering or serious injury to body or to mental and physical health. So this is yet another potential where some of the acts, as discussed as gender apartheid, could be included. But of course, it doesn't change the fact that, as it stands, there is no crime of gender and apartheid included in Article 7 of the Rome Statute. And this is something that we are also looking into changing. And there is a possibility to amend the Rome Statute to include the crime of gender and apartheid. And the Rome Statute can be amended by a 2/3 majority vote at a meeting of the Assembly of State Parties or a review conference called the Assembly. And once adopted, an amendment goes into effect for all state parties 1 year after it is ratified by 7/8 of the state parties. And also, as per Article 121, paragraph 1 of the Rome Statute, any state party can propose amendments, and that's in accordance with that article 7 years after the statute enters into force. So of course, it is perfectly fine to introduce amendments now. Of course, the process is very long, and as it stands, there are several amendments that are being taken into consideration. There have been several big campaigns to, for example, amend the Rome Statute to include the crime of ecocide, and there are also proposals to also expand on the wording of gender persecution and so on. And together with the International Bar Association and our office in The Hague, the IBA has been working on a document that, for example, explains some of the needed changes to the Rome Statute. The first document of this sort was published back in 2021. And this year, there will be a new document. After our discussions, we discussed that we should include the language of gender apartheid, and recommendation to include an amendment to the Rome Statute to very much codify gender apartheid. And of course, what will need to happen is very much engaging states, and the more states are willing to support this kind of amendment, the more chances that actually it's going to be to proceed further. But for this, again, there is greater need to ensure that as many countries as possible are willing to engage on the topic. And in this case, we are talking about the engagement of all member states to the Rome Statute. So of course, we are talking about a much smaller number of countries than in the case of the UN and consideration around the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity. But nonetheless, this is something that can happen, and indeed, further discussions are very much needed. And last but not least, I want to talk very briefly about domestic codification. And in relation to domestic codification, of course, this will differ from country to country. The codification process or introducing new legislation differs. The process differs among countries. And here in the UK, of course, a majority of legislations, of bills, are introduced by the government. And if the government introduces a bill, it is highly likely that the bill will proceed through both houses. We have House of Commons and House of Lords, and then will become law. But unfortunately, at this stage, the UK government still is not engaged on the topic. Although we do have a new government, and we already approached the government in relation to the topic of gender apartheid, and hopefully we'll also have some kind of response from the government in terms of how they would like to address the topic. And And as the government is still not particularly engaged on the issue of gender apartheid, we approach a number of parliamentarians who are willing to table so-called private members' bills. Private members' bills are bills introduced by individual members of either of the House. And currently we are in conversations with Brendan O'Hara MP, who is in the House of Commons, who's willing to table a private members' bill on the topic of gender apartheid, and indeed codifying gender apartheid, criminalizing gender apartheid. Currently, we are waiting for the reopening of Parliament after summer recess. Once this is done, he will put the bill into a ballot. And then from the ballot, 25 bills will be picked. And if you are lucky, if he's among those 25 bills, it means that, of course, the bill will receive its first, second reading. During those readings, of course, this is a great opportunity to engage on the topic, discuss not only the wording of the proposed bill codifying gender apartheid, but also the situation of women and girls. And this is something that will enable us to ensure that there is further conversation on the topic in the UK Parliament. We table a number of parliamentary questions, and once Parliament is back, we also hope to table or request debates on the topic. And again, to ensure that the topic of gender apartheid, the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan, is discussed by parliamentarians in the UK, and of course, ensure that this way we continue putting pressure on the UK government to engage and support, ideally, all those different options I just discussed, whether the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity and inclusion of gender apartheid there, an amendment to the Rome Statute, or indeed domestic legislation criminalizing gender apartheid. I will stop here, but if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajab. Really appreciate your time, and also thank you for explaining. Well, it seems like we do have a very long way to go, but we're surely not giving up yet. Our next speaker is Ms. Lina Rosebay, a journalist and a poet. Ms. Rosebay, we would like to know, what can journalists, particularly Afghan journalists, do to advocate for the codification of gender apartheid as a crime against humanity, and how can we engage Afghan journalists in our cause? The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. And I think on such a tragic, dark day in recent history of Afghanistan, it is great to be among a group of women who are sharing a passion for women's rights, who are definitely advocating for the voiceless women of Afghanistan. To answer your question, I think there is a very fine line between being a journalist and being an advocate. When you're an advocate, obviously you have an open hand to use every tool available to you and every opportunity to advocate for the cause that you're passionate about. But you, as a journalist, you're bound to abide by rules such as remaining impartial to the news that you're covering, regardless of the limitation that the profession of journalism bring with itself. I think the Afghan journalists and Afghan media outlets, especially abroad, have given a fair share of coverage to the issue of women's rights violation in Afghanistan, and that indirectly contributes to recognition of gender apartheid in Afghanistan. There are many reports, as I said, that are being produced about the situation in Afghanistan. And the other good news, and I think good achievement that we have is the media outlets abroad that are actually launched by Afghan women who just recently arrived to these countries, that are solely focused in providing news and information about the situation of women in Afghanistan. We have media outlets such as Rukhsana Media that operates from UK. We have Zan Times that's based in Toronto, Canada, and they both are launched by Afghan women who just recently arrived to those countries from Afghanistan. And they have a group of very active female and male journalists who are in touch with women inside Afghanistan receive first-hand news and doing advocating on behalf of Afghan women. And they also put out research and reports that are solely focused on women's rights violation by the Taliban. In terms of Western media or non-Afghan medias, I think Lauren also mentioned that they are too busy covering other news. Sorry, Evelina mentioned that the media tend to go after what's happening or after rather crisis or big news that are happening across the globe. So we have actively two big wars that are happening in the world, the Ukraine war and the Middle East. And unfortunately, the coverage of that news has taken a large portion of media coverage in the West, sort of devoted to covering those wars. And the issue of women's rights in Afghanistan is sort of sidebar and left at the shadow, where there's not much being done or covered by Western media about what's happening to women inside Afghanistan, beside a report here and there. For example, today is the 3rd anniversary of fall of Afghanistan into the hand of Taliban. We may say a special report in CNN about something related to Afghan women, but other than that, that coverage is sort of pretty much stopped everywhere in Western media. And I think the media should or can do a lot more to focus on this issue, not only from the aspect of this issue being a human rights related issue, but I think, and I think Evelina mentioned, encourage the Western countries to recognize gender apartheid as a crime and recognize that it's happening in Afghanistan. I think a major aspect of this issue that's not being sort of mentioned in this process of activism that is happening in order for the world to recognize gender apartheid is that this issue can also indirectly impact the Western countries. You have Afghanistan, you have a population is consisted of women. So when you have a generation of women who are barred from going to school, we have a generation of women who are barred from working outside their countries, they obviously give birth to a generation that is nothing but children who are raised in a very sort of a fundamentalist country, where Afghanistan can eventually turn a place where we can accept a lot of security threats, a lot of terrorism, and a lot of other sorts of activities that can indirectly impact the Western society and countries in the long term. You cannot leave and ignore a country like Afghanistan and let it be, and ignore issues like the violation of women's rights in that country, and assume that the result or the outcome of such issues will only remain without the borders of Afghanistan, and it will not affect the world. That is not the case. So unfortunately, I think there's not the attention of the media has shifted from Afghanistan in general. There's not a lot of interest in covering the news related to Afghanistan and to women of Afghanistan. And I think there needs to be some form of attention, being sort of activism, or maybe a stronger advocates for women's rights issues in Afghanistan and Western society, where they encourage the foreign media to pay attention to this issue in Afghanistan.
Ms. Roseberry, really appreciate your insight. And I do agree that journalists have many restrictions, but there are others who are actually working, and the reporting has in itself is effective in informing people on what's happening in Afghanistan. Now, it's an open forum. Anyone who has any questions, we have 20 minutes. Well, the floor is yours, and we're looking to have questions from the audience. Whoever has a question, please raise your hands. Meanwhile, I would like to request our speakers if they could please open their video cameras. if we can have our speakers open their cameras for our audience, so when the audience are asking questions, they are interacting with our speakers directly.
Thank you so much. So I'm sorry, I'm talking from Kabul, Afghanistan, and we don't have electricity. So if I turn on my video camera, I will lose my internet access, and then, of course, you can't see me because we don't have electricity. So I will make it very short. Thank you so much for letting us be joined with in this webinar or conference. Thank you so much. I just want to, beside all the things that I listened from the speakers, one more thing that beside what we are struggling inside of Afghanistan with the Taliban, with the situation, it is really, really hard. So you know better, I don't want to repeat it a lot, but one more thing that we are struggling, that we are making the first-hand report for the foreign outlets outside of Afghanistan. I don't want to name those outlets, but they are very popular, all of them outside of Afghanistan. But the thing is that, but because we are freelance and we don't have any contract, anything, they just reach to us and we send all the information, the reports, even the photo, video, the text, everything. But at the end, they promise for us, okay, at the end of the month, I will pay you this much, you make this much report. But at the end, they just disappear or block us. When they get the report, everything, then they block us, they don't give, they don't pay because, and we can't complain. And I know that so many times if we just put pressure on them and say that, okay, I will report you to the maybe RSF or other reporter of the borders, then I don't know, it's not confirmed, but they will report us to the Taliban. And then the Taliban will arrest the local journalists. So that is really a big, big problem. Recently, I really stopped to not work with the foreign medias. Even we have some of them inside of Afghanistan. We have still some agencies, a lot, they are working here in Afghanistan. The reporters that they're being hired and they are inside of Afghanistan, they have a lot of good opportunities, everything paid very well. Even they are receiving like $10,000, maybe even more than this. And then the Taliban, they don't have any problem with them. They welcome them anywhere they can go and join with the press conference or anything. And also they can stay and they receive a very good accommodation. But at the end, we are the local journalists that we are working for them. They pay us very, very less. But there is no difference between our work and with the foreigners. Because we are doing the same jobs, the only thing, maybe they are a little bit expert in the language, that's it. But then all the reports is published by their name. We can't publish the report by our name because we are at risk, and there is no at the beginning that we can't save you if you are in a very bad situation or anything will happen to you. And at the end, if some of them will pay us, this is very, very less. And sometimes, like as a freelance journalist, because they don't hire us, when they say, okay, today you should work for me, and like yesterday, when we go to the press conference or somewhere as a female journalist, the Taliban don't allow us. And when they say that, oh, it's an Afghan journalist, no, you're not allowed. You're a female, you don't allow. But beside me, there is a foreign journalist, a female. She's very welcome and she can join to that press conference, everything. And then we just lose our time, everything, and at the end that press or that media saying that I can't pay you because it didn't work for me today. So this is all, beside all these things, that we are very much struggling here in Afghanistan. What foreign journalists outside of Afghanistan, they use local journalists, and what inside there is foreign media that they're using Afghan journalists. And all of them, it is really, really unfair. Thank you so much. I just want to share these things.
Thank you so much, Zahra Jan. Yes, the Taliban's double standard with Afghan women on the ground and working with them and with foreign women have been noticed and have been discussed many, many times. And it's unfortunate. And that's why we are here to discuss that. I see Dr. Ochab has raised her hand, and also Ms. Lina Rosbe. We will go to Dr. Ochab to talk about the legality and what
Habiba John, we don't have your voice properly. I think you may have some internet.
Hello, I didn't hear the whole question, but I will try to answer, also responding to the previous speaker, just also to the organizers. Maybe for the recording, for the publication of the recording, maybe it's good to remove the name of the previous person, just for security reasons. Something very important that I wanted to mention is that the International Bar Association provides secretariat to the high-level panel on media freedom, which consists of lawyers from all over the world who are working on media freedom and indeed helping journalists, and especially journalists at risk. And this is the issue that you just raised is something very, very important. And I think it would be very important for the high-level panel on media freedom to actually be aware of the issue, without mentioning any names, but ultimately informing how local journalists are being treated by international media outlets. And again, without naming anyone reporting this kind of issues for security reasons, at least at this stage. But of course, it will be possible to organize even very confidential conversations because between some of the journalists and the high-level media panel, but ultimately for them also to investigate it, and then if the once they have findings as well, then for them to raise it also with media outlets, and then explore, depending on the location of the media outlets, what are the options for engaging them, for reporting any misconduct and so on. So I think this is something that could be explored. But I also wanted to mention one more thing, and something that, of course, as we are collecting information about the situation of women, there is, apart from sending it and working with journalists from all over the world, there is also a very important avenue for engagement with the International Criminal Court. I didn't discuss it in great detail. I mentioned, of course, that there's a Rome statute that defined, for example, gender persecution. And indeed, before the International Criminal Court, there is currently a case, and the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is looking into the situation in Afghanistan. They have jurisdiction to do so, so it means that they can look into human rights violations there that meet the legal definition of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and even genocide. And in the first instance, the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is looking into gender persecution. Of course, the International Criminal Court and the Office of the Prosecutor cannot look into gender apartheid because it's still not codified, but they can look into everything what is happening in Afghanistan under the heading of crimes against humanity as gender persecution. And we had a number of calls with the Office of the Prosecutor where they discussed the kind of evidence that they're interested in and the kind of first-hand evidence that would help them to make findings and to identify those most responsible for the atrocities, and then proceed with application for arrest warrants, and then be able to proceed with cases as they have done in many other situations. So any kind of evidence of the kind of crimes and the kind of violations that women and girls in Afghanistan are being subjected to, this could be sent to the Office of the Prosecutor as so-called Article 15 submissions. And then it will be formally considered by the Office of the Prosecutor and will inform their considerations and help them to actually formulate cases and formulate identify individuals most responsible for the crimes. So something to keep in mind. And one of the things that I'm going to do as a follow-up, I will raise confidentially the issue of how local journalists are being treated, without, of course, names, and of course we don't have the names of the media outlets, but if you'd like to share them confidentially, we can accommodate that as well, for them to be aware and for them to actually start looking into the issue. But the second thing, if you are interested as well, we can also share with you information how to contact the Office of the Prosecutor to ensure that the evidence that you are collecting is also shared with the Office of the Prosecutor, and they can include it in their considerations and investigations.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. I will share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Evelina. I think our moderator has some technical difficulties, so she's not able to join, but she's trying here. Maybe until that time, Ms. Lina Rouzbeh, if you go ahead and share your thoughts about the recent question that we had from our participant from Afghanistan.
Yes, well, this is pretty much, it's very shocking to me as a journalist, what she said. And I think when you're contracted to work with a foreign media outlet, you have to have a clear contract with them. They need to provide you with a contract. You need to sign that, and every specifics from your salary to the hours that you work with them need to sort of be included in that contract. So you have sort of a legal contract with them and you that they need to pay you. But what worried me the most is that I hope I heard that wrong, but you said the media, the foreign media outlet threatens you that they will let the Taliban know about you when you're asking about your pay. I think this is a very, very serious issue that although Evelina says we're not supposed to mention the name of this media outlet, but I think at this time you have whistleblowers like New York Times and Washington Post who are looking for stories like that. So if you have credible information about a media outlet threatening you that they will share your information with the Taliban just because you're asking for your salary, you need to write an email to other media outlets, mention the name of this media outlet, mention the name of this journalist if you have evidence, and speak out against them. Because if you're the one that they're dealing with you in such a way, God knows how many other female journalists are facing this threat from them. And I think it's very unfair to Afghan women journalists inside Afghanistan who are already under severe pressure by the Taliban, who are not allowing them to work, to be able to work, and at the same time being told by a foreign media outlet that we will hand you over to the Taliban if you ask for your salary. So this is a very, very important, I think, issue that you need to raise. You need to find a way actually to share all that information with whistleblowers, with media outlets who are looking for stories like that to cover in Afghanistan. And I think that media outlet needs to stop its operation in Afghanistan if they're threatening Afghan female journalists by using Taliban against them.
Thank you, Ms. Rouzbeh, but it is not only that they threatened, but it happened. Still, we have some local journalists that they are in prison and it happened. And it's not safe to say something about it right now, but this is our problems here. It's beside the Taliban what they are doing. We are struggling from foreign journalists, foreign media. It's not all, but a lot. It happens a lot. And thank you so much for supporting.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lina John. I would also like to add that this is horrifying. This is the first time I'm hearing that someone is saying that even the foreign media, they are treating our Afghan female journalists who are really trying to be still in the battle and like not to give up and give this information out. This is truly heartbreaking and horrifying. And from our perspective, in regard of the payments, I think it's most of ethical journalism that the foreign media should obey, and there might be some of the media outlets that they might not be stick to it. I don't know. We can't really say anything about it here, but in regards of the payment, we did share this issue many times with the foreign media outlets that we are in contact, and also the media supporting organization. And this is something that they are, on the other hand, they are saying like we are not finding the potential people to be able to share the information and accurate information from Afghanistan with us. So this is really kind of like contrary, but we are sharing this information with them. And thank you so much from our participant from Afghanistan to share this issue. We will be able to share it and still advocate for such kind of issues not to happen in Afghanistan, at least at this time and moment. Okay, so we will get another question. If there's any question from our participants, they can just raise their hand. And Habiba John was sharing a message with me that she was really seeing a heart attack. Then she was out of the meeting and she joined back, but she is not able to, unmute. I don't know, there might be some problems. Okay, so if there isn't any question, we can wrap up the meeting. I would say, because the closing remarks also belongs to me, so I'll be just going ahead with that. Yes, Habiba John. Yes, we have you now.
Okay, thank you so much, Farishta Jan, and I'm back. My sincere apologies. I've been going back and forth because of the technical issues. Zahra Jan, the case that you mentioned, kindly take all the details of the case and the names and everything. You're at the right place, and you actually discussed this at the right place. Farishta Jan Ahmadi, as she said, she will advocate and take care of your case and make sure that the justice is served. And at the same time, for the closing remarks, as you said, Farishta Jan, I request Farishta Jan to come in and speak. And if we have any other questions after the program ends, please send us those questions in our emails. Contact AJSO, contact the speakers, and Farishta Jan has already shared the email with everyone. So kindly send us your questions, send us your any other difficulty that the journalists might be facing in Afghanistan to the AJSO email address, and AJSO is there to advocate for women of Afghanistan and work as much as they can. And
I'm sorry, I'm disturbing too much. I don't have the email. Maybe I joined late. Can you please write again on the chat so I will have the copy? Thank you so much.
The email is right. Farishta Jan just wrote the email and shared with everyone. And again, Zahra Jan, please send all the information to the email shared with you and with the audience. For the closing remarks, Farishta Jan, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. Thank you for the speakers, and thank you for having us, the audience, and everybody coming in together. Before my internet goes back out because I'm getting notifications, Farishta Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Habiba John, for the wonderful moderation, and our respected guest speakers. Thank you so much for taking us your time and taking part in this crucial webinar today. It is very important, as we are now, it has been 3 years that it happened in Afghanistan, and it's unbelievable to me myself. I'm sure for most of our colleagues and the participants here, it is unbelievable that so much potential and achievement doesn't exist in Afghanistan anymore. Not the potential, but the achievements, of course. But we are here to advocate. So I really like the quote from Dr. Evelina that said, if we are not hearing anything from Afghanistan, it doesn't mean that nothing is happening in Afghanistan. There are so many things going around. The only thing is that our female journalists and most of the journalists, male or female, they do not have that security, especially the physical security, to share those horrifying information. But we are here, and I do believe that most of the media supporting organizations, they are also here to get this information safely from you and to raise this voice on the international stages, to see if there are organizations, of course, that they have the upper hand to bring a positive change in Afghanistan, so they take action. In our advocacy committee for women journalists, which is a newly built up setup within AJSO organization. This is a group of 8 female journalists from all over the world, from different countries, all Afghan, that we are here to advocate for the right of women journalists and all the women who are advocating for their rights in Afghanistan. So I just wanted to let you know that you are not alone. We are here, and we are advocating to the point that we can. And I do call on all international communities, international organizations such as Canadian Women for Afghan Women, which is a really great platform, always being on the forefront and always advocating for the right of women, that we all came together and we all advocate for the right of women journalists. They do not want much. This is only fundamental rights: being able to go to school, being able to define themselves as women, being able to work and present themselves as a woman in Afghanistan. And I think this is not much, but they do not have this right, and they do not have access to the tools to define themselves as a human even. Thank you so much. I will not take that much time for all of your active participation, colleagues and our respected guest speakers. Have a great day, good evening, afternoon, and good night to everybody. Take care, and we will be sharing the video with our participants sometime soon. And all of you, take care.